The scoreline tells part of the story, but only part of it. Because what this weekend really showed in the Premier League title race was a shift in emotional momentum. And at this stage of the season, that matters almost as much as the football itself. Arsenal lost 2-1 at home to Bournemouth. And let's start in the right place here. This was not simply Bournemouth going to the Emirates and stealing one. Arsenal put themselves in a position where losing that game became possible. And then they lost it. Because worse than the result was the way they played. Again, that is the real issue, not one defeat in isolation. The issue is that Arsenal are starting to look like a side that has become to comfortable playing safe football, to careful, to risk-averse, to focus on avoiding damage instead of actually causing it. And once you get to the point where you need creativity, courage, spontaneity, aggression on the ball, and players willing to break the pattern, suddenly those things do not arrive naturally anymore. Some people still try to excuse it by saying Arsenal face deep blocks every week that teams sit in, kill space, and force them into sterile possession. But that argument does not really survive this game. Bournemouth are not some passive low-block side who just camp in their own box and pray. Iraola's team are aggressive, brave, well-drilled, competitive. They press, they attack second balls, they run forward quickly, and they force you to play a real game. And Arsenal still could not expand their football. That is the point. This is not just about breaking down defensive sides. It is about Arsenal looking stuck in a version of themselves that limits their own creativity. As if in the search for control, they have coached too much freedom out of the team. And once that happens, once security becomes the obsession, you can end up protecting yourself from chaos while also protecting yourself from your own attacking potential. Against Bournemouth, Arsenal had possession, but very little life in it. And possession without life is not control. It is decoration. The main figures on the ball were Raya, Gabriel, and Saliba. Now, center backs being involved in build-up is normal. That is modern football. The problem is when that becomes the whole picture. When the ball keeps going backwards, when there is no real punch through the middle, when nobody attacks the half spaces with conviction, when every forward pass feels like a gamble and every safe pass feels like a relief, then the team becomes sterile. And Arsenal were exactly that. They look nervous on the ball, and that matters. Because nerves in a title race do not only show up when defending your box, they show up in hesitation, in conservative decisions, in the extra touch, in the refusal to break a line, in the hopeful long ball when the structure is not there to win the second ball. And Arsenal were not winning second balls consistently either. So they ended up in this strange place where they were neither building cleanly, nor sustaining attacks properly. Everything felt short, flat, and infertile. And here comes the uncomfortable part. This is not just bad luck. This is a choice. A choice of model, a choice of behavior, a choice made by the coach. Mikel Arteta deserves enormous credit for rebuilding Arsenal. That part is real. He brought the club back into serious contention, gave it structure, made it competitive again. But competitive is no longer enough. This squad should be offering more than this. And I do not just mean in terms of trophies. I mean in the level of football it produces. Because that is the core criticism. It feels like Arsenal have convinced themselves that, in order to finally win, they had to make their football uglier, as if reducing risk was automatically the quickest route to the title. But there is a trap in that logic. When you take too much risk out of a team, sometimes you also take out surprise, flow, instinct, and attacking hunger. So yes, you may become safer, but you also become more predictable. And predictable teams in April become vulnerable. Manchester City looked at that and sensed blood. Because the day after Arsenal stumbled, City went to Stamford Bridge and delivered almost the opposite emotional message. The first half was poor, properly poor. Chelsea found ways to break the first wave of pressure, attack the spaces that opened up when City's second line was not connected properly, and exposed some real structural issues. The front players looked like they were speaking different football languages. One was running, another was waiting, another was making the wrong choice. Rodri, in particular, had a very shaky first half. But then you saw the difference in mentality, in coaching, in competitive memory. Guardiola made his adjustments at halftime, tightened that second line without the ball, improved the distances between units, and City came out looking like a completely different side. And I do not mean that in a lazy pundit way. I mean they looked like a team whose emotional state had changed. Chelsea could barely breathe in the second half. City took control of territory, became more aggressive after the loss, regained rhythm, regained authority, and turned 20 strong minutes into a 3-0 win in London. And for me, that matters more than the score on its own. Because Arsenal had a home game to make a statement and came out looking smaller. City had a messy first half away from home and came out looking bigger. One side felt the pressure. The other side seemed to recognize the moment and grow into it. One looked burdened by risk. The other looked energized by the stakes. And of course, that is where the manager comes in. Guardiola corrected what needed correcting. He fixed the spaces Chelsea were finding after beating the first line of pressure, restored compactness, and gave City something they almost always have when they enter champion mode: emotional control in the middle of chaos. That is priceless at this point in the season. Then you add the players who changed the temperature of the game. Cherki grew into it massively, not just because of the assists, but because of the function he performed. He was the player who turned possession into threat, the player who gave City unpredictability, who attacked between the lines, who sped up decisions, who made the game less procedural and more dangerous. And that comparison is painful for Arsenal, because right now City have players who can inject personality into the game. When it starts going flat, Arsenal, too often, look like they are waiting for permission. That is why, for the first time in this run-in, I look at the title race and see Manchester City as favorites. Not only because the mathematics are beginning to smile in their direction, although that matters, but more because of the feeling around both teams. The body language, the sharpness, the emotional profile, the way each side handled the weekend. Arsenal are still alive, obviously. It would be foolish to declare anything before the head-to-head, but the Bournemouth defeat cost more than 3 points. It left anxiety behind. It left doubt behind. It left the sense that when this team most needs freedom, it becomes trapped by its own caution. City, meanwhile, left Stamford Bridge with that familiar look about them. That look of a side that may not dominate every minute, may not even play brilliantly for a full 90, but once they smell weakness, once the water opens up, they start circling like a team that has done this before and fully expects to do it again. And now the direct clash is coming at exactly the point in the season where the slogans stop mattering and the emotional structure of a team gets exposed. Arsenal may go into that game thinking a draw is enough. That alone is dangerous, because trying to play for a draw against the City, in this atmosphere, in this context, can quickly become the fastest route to suffering. In the end, this weekend did not just tell us that Arsenal lost and City won. It told us something much more important. One team looks like it is trying to manage the title. The other looks hungry enough to rip it away from them. So here is the question. Right now, looking not just at the table, but at the football, the posture in the moment. Which team actually looks more like champions to you? Arsenal or Manchester City?